In 1963, Lake Chad was the sixth largest lake in the world. By 2024, it had lost more than 90% of its surface area. The communities that depended on it did not adapt. They collapsed, and many got recruited by Boko Haram. Africa's engineers proposed a $50 billion fix, a 2,400-kilometer canal from the Congo rainforest into the Sahara to bring the water back. This is Transaqua, the $50 billion plan 8 nations have officially backed to reverse one of the worst environmental collapses of the 20th century. This video breaks down why it has not been built in 40 years and whether the cheaper version gets built first. The Sahel is a strip of land running 5,000 kilometers across the full width of Africa, the shoreline between the Sahara Desert and the habitable land below it. More than 300 million people live here. Temperatures are rising 1.5 times faster than the global average. Droughts are lasting longer. The farming season is shrinking. 2,000 kilometers to the south, the Congo River pours 41,000 cubic meters of water into the Atlantic Ocean every second. The Congo Basin holds roughly 52% of Africa's entire surface water reserves, and the DRC, the country the river runs through, has one of the lowest rates of clean water access on the continent despite being one of the most water-rich nations on Earth. Too much water in the wrong place. Not enough water where 300 million people are running out of it. The engineers who proposed Trans Aqua looked at both facts and asked whether a canal could bridge them. Lake Chad did not just shrink, it became a tool of war. When the lake was full, it sustained one of the most productive inland fisheries in Africa. Farmers irrigated from its shores, pastoralists watered their herds. 4 nations shared a resource that, while contested, was large enough for most of them. When the water retreated, the resource base collapsed. Herders competed with farmers over what remained. The UN Development Program has directly linked this environmental collapse to the rise of Boko Haram, a violent militant group that is notorious for its campaign of terrorism, mass kidnappings, and efforts to overthrow the Nigerian government in order to establish a fundamentalist Islamic state. Boko Haram has built a shadow economy across the basin by taxing what was left: fish trade, cattle movement, farming, water point access. At one point, the group controlled up to half the fish trade in the Baga region of Nigeria. Refusal to pay brought violence. By early 2024, 2.8 million people in the Lake Chad Basin were internally displaced. Security incidents rose by 23% between 2023 and 2024. The lake's disappearance did not cause this alone, but it removed the economic foundation that everything else sat on. That is what the engineers are trying to restore. The full Transaqua proposal was designed by Italian engineering firm Bonifica in 1982 and has been refined, endorsed, shelved, revived, and debated ever since. The plan is straightforward in concept. The Congo's right bank tributaries, which currently flow west to the Atlantic, would be dammed and diverted north through a 2,400-kilometer canal across the Central African Republic into the Chari River, which feeds Lake Chad. The diverted volume, 5 to 8% of the Congo's average flow, would be enough to reverse the lake's decline. Beyond refilling the lake, Transaqua envisioned a full development corridor, 50,000 to 70,000 square kilometers of irrigated farmland, hydroelectric power, and a navigable inland waterway connecting landlocked Central African nations to international trade for the first time. In 2016, Chinese contractor PowerChina signed a memorandum of understanding with the Lake Chad Basin Commission. In 2018, the commission formally endorsed Transaqua and 8 nations backed it: Cameroon, Chad, Nigeria, Algeria, Sudan, the Central African Republic, and Libya. 40 years of engineering, 8 governments, an official endorsement. As of mid-2026, not a single meter of canal has been built. There is one country missing from that list of 8 endorsing nations: the Democratic Republic of Congo, the country whose rivers would be dammed, whose land the canal would cross, whose water would be diverted. The DRC has stated at the presidential and parliamentary level that Transaqua discussions have not given it meaningful participation. It is being asked to contribute its water, land, and ecological stability to a project designed for its neighbors, while its own population has no reliable access to clean water and its water infrastructure remains in crisis. French scientists have separately raised concerns that diverting even 5 to 8% of the Congo's flow could permanently damage the Congo Basin ecosystem, the second largest tropical rainforest after the Amazon. An international environmental impact assessment has not been completed. Until those two facts change, the full $50 billion canal is a political document, not a construction plan. While Transaqua stalled, engineers found something smaller and smarter. The Ubangi River, the Congo's largest right bank tributary, flows close enough to the Chari River that a connection is physically feasible. A proposed dam on the Ubangi would generate 360 megawatts of electricity with 215 megawatts powering pumps to push water north toward Lake Chad. Estimated cost $10 billion. Estimated delivery 91 cubic meters per second. Even more elegant is the Bria gravity scheme. By tapping the Congo River at a high enough elevation in the Central African Republic, water flows northward by gravity with no pumping required. Estimated cost $4.5 billion. Estimated delivery 108 cubic meters per second, slightly more than the Ubangi scheme at less than half the cost. The African Development Bank signed a $10.2 million grant with the Lake Chad Basin Commission in March 2025. The World Bank has committed $170 million to a Lake Chad recovery project. Neither has committed to the full Transaqua Canal. The money is moving toward the smaller versions. Whether they are enough is the bigger question. The Congo River discharges 41,000 cubic meters of water into the Atlantic every second. That is more than 3 times the discharge of the Mississippi River, unused every single day. Transaqua would divert 5 to 8% of that flow to restore Lake Chad. The Bria gravity scheme would do it for $4.5 billion using only the natural fall of the land. No pumps, no power stations. The DRC is simultaneously the most water-rich country in Africa and one of the lowest on the continent for clean water access. 3/4 of its population cannot reliably drink from a tap. Boko Haram at one point controlled up to half of the fish trade on Lake Chad's Nigerian shore. Environmental collapse did not create the insurgency. It fed the conditions that allowed it to take hold. Lake Chad's surface area fluctuates between 1,500 and 2,500 square kilometers today. In 1963, it covered 25,000. The lake lost the equivalent of the entire country of Rwanda. Transaqua's proponents have been making the same argument for 40 years. The water exists, the engineering is proven, and the need is undeniable. They are right about all three. The fourth question, the one they have consistently struggled to answer, is who builds it and who pays for what they lose in the process. The DRC has not agreed. The World Bank has not committed to the full canal. The environmental impact assessment has not been completed. 8 endorsing nations have not put significant capital behind their endorsements. PowerChina signed memorandums and has not broken ground. As of 2026, these smaller schemes are gathering more serious financial attention. The African Development Bank is investing, the World Bank is engaged, but the unresolved question remains: can a $4.5 billion gravity canal deliver enough water to genuinely reverse what happened to Lake Chad? Or does it just slow the decline while the political will to build the full version stalls on objections that were never properly addressed? The engineers have a plan. The lake is still shrinking. The Transaqua Project was first proposed in 1982. In the 44 years since, the world built the Channel Tunnel, the Three Gorges Dam, the Burj Khalifa, 47,000 kilometers of Chinese high-speed rail, and a bridge in China so tall you need a glass elevator to reach the cafe at the top. The 2,400-kilometer Congo to Sahara Canal remains in the feasibility study phase. To be fair, the feasibility studies are very thorough. Here is what is certain. The water exists. The engineering has been ready since 1982. The need is not in question. The $50 billion canal is blocked by a country that was never properly invited into the conversation. The $4.5 billion gravity version is viable and unfunded, and the lake continues to sit between what is politically possible and what is physically necessary. Whether the world finds a way to close that gap, or whether Lake Chad becomes the story of what happens when a solvable problem gets 40 more years of meetings instead of concrete, is still being decided. If this shocked you, wait until you see what China has already built to solve a completely different kind of crisis. That story is next.